Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. Today I'm joined by Nash Herman, a policy analyst at the Free Market Independence Institute think tank in Denver. Well, Nash, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Brandon. Happy to be here.
Well, Nash, two big threats to Colorado's economy have emerged in recent weeks. The first is this new progressive or graduated income tax scheme that might end up on the ballot in 2026. This initiative would raise taxes dramatically, especially for high-income earners. And Nash, you recently wrote an article on this progressive income tax scheme. What effect would this have on Colorado?
Yeah, well, first, I actually want to talk about the claims that they're making for why they're going into this progressive income tax. You know, they're really starting to use the budget hysteria that the legislature created, to say that sky's falling, we need to do something quick, give up your rights, your TABOR rights is exactly the first thing they go to. And this is kind of the step they're taking to get there. So,
Oh, definitely. The state government has more money than ever. I mean, tax collections are at record highs, and yet they still can't balance the budget. I don't know
mhm.
about you, but every time I've had a raise in my life or got a better paying job, I was able to still live within my means and maybe save some of that extra money. But unfortunately, with our legislators, they just spend every dollar they get, putting us in just a tough financial situation. And going back to the taxpayers, asking for more and more money is really their only strategy, it seems. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. As I said, the sky's been falling since last year. We had our shortfall, which we've actually tried to stop using their rhetoric around that because it wasn't a shortfall. For the average person, you and me, like you said, we need to make cuts sometimes when stuff isn't going well in the economy. But this shortfall they had this year before the OBA, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, um, it's not a shortfall when the budget's still growing by $1.6 billion dollars. That's 4% raise. I'd love that every year. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is absolutely crazy. And it just seems like they want to just take more and more out of our economy, out of the hard of the paychecks of hardworking Coloradans. And in Colorado currently we have a very fair system, right? Everybody is taxed at the same rate. 4.4 something percent. This last year it went down slightly because thanks to Tabor, it helped create an income tax reduction. But generally speaking, everybody pays the exact same rate, besides from the tax credits and all the other little things that people can do. But this would totally penalize people who work hard, who make a lot of money, who are the job creators and the entrepreneurs and the people who are employing other people across Colorado. I mean, that doesn't seem fair to me at all. What do you think?
Yeah, oh, exactly. It's built on envy, it's a way to get people because it's all about the fairness, paying the fair share. And that's actually a myth in itself, for the state tax collections. If you actually use Department of Revenue statistics, um, that's what they use a lot to back their arguments about this isn't fair, our tax system isn't fair. They say our tax code is regressive. And what that means is that poor people, as a percent of their incomes, pay more to taxes than do rich people. Okay, that's true, but that's for the overall tax code versus the income tax, already, as you mentioned, is actually probably the fairest tax that we as Coloradans pay in terms of state and local taxes. And if you take that out of our overall tax burden, it's also the most progressive already. It's not regressive. When you look at things like the sales and use tax, property taxes, those are highly regressive. And so I mentioned that in my article that was just published. Um, and my intern also last week had a great article that people should check out on Complete Colorado, also along these lines. But, okay, let's talk about fairness. You could remove you could completely eliminate the state income tax for the poorest Coloradans in Colorado. And for the Department of Revenue, that's people making less than $15,000. Okay, you could remove it. Their tax burden, meaning the percent of their income that goes to taxes, would still be at like 26%. So a quarter of their taxes, or a quarter of their incomes, are going to taxes. But vote for that guy to pay more in taxes so it's more fair. Well, no, that's not fair. They're not being helped by other people paying more taxes. Their tax burdens are still insane. How is someone supposed to live paying a quarter of their incomes to the state? So, and then yeah, as you said, with uh, these are the people who made this state great, the entrepreneurs who employ a lot of people. And if you follow this logic to its conclusion, okay, what happens when these people get fed up and they don't want to live in Colorado anymore? They'll point to other states. Oh, California, New York, they have their graduated tax systems. But California, for as much of a burden as their tax system is, they also have stuff to fall back on, like Silicon Valley. What does Colorado have to offer that will keep these businesses here and these high earners? Utah is right next door. They're consistently ranked first in economic freedom. They're always at the top of the charts recently, and they have a flat rate. And I'm sure a lot of people would be looking at Utah and other, nearby states. So,
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I'm sure we'd see job creators, entrepreneurs, business owners flee the state if they could, because, this is their livelihood. This is what they've worked so hard to do. And I'm always so suspicious too when I see some of these people pushing these ballot measures or pushing increased taxes because they always say, oh, it'll only affect the rich people. It'll only affect the rich people. And then you're like, okay, well, what do you mean by rich? And it's like, oh, yeah, are we talking $100,000 a year? Are we talking $200,000 a year? What are we talking? And then soon enough, it's like, well, no, actually, we're going to include just everybody. We're just going to raise taxes on everybody. And then the people at the very lowest, they'll just get credits. They'll just get tax
mhm.
credits and we'll already create this system. So it's like, we can't trust these people for one. They're trying to always take every penny they can get. They can't balance the budget. It'll never be enough, no matter how much of our money we give them or how much they take from us. They're always going to find ways to spend more and more of it. And it creates this, in my mind, this social stratification. Because if
Yeah.
you're, a middle income earner and you're like, okay, finally I completed my college education or I opened this business or I, finally achieved this high level position at my job. It's like, oh, now you're in this new tax bracket and now you're stuck. You're almost like you did all this work and now you're back down to where you were because your taxes have shot up so much. So now you're
Mhm.
kind of like trapped. So we're going to have the ultra wealthy, who are going to figure out ways not to pay taxes
Mhm.
anyway because they can pay those tax accountants, right, and lawyers, and they know how to move their money around. And then you have everybody else who's kind of like, okay, now we're stuck down here, but this middle area for people who are just becoming kind of wealthier and better off are trapped and unable to go anywhere because you have these policies that punish them for being productive, for doing well. I mean, am I wrong in terms of having that kind of thought process?
No, exactly. Once you create a carve out, we saw it with fees and enterprises, right? The state budget used to be, I don't remember off the top of my head the numbers, but it used to be mostly subject to TABOR. And now only 25% of the budget is subject to TABOR, right? So, and I just wanted to mention, as we are talking about it, back to the Department of Revenue statistics, the highest earners, according to as the Department of Revenue measures, is those earning $200,000 and above. And they already pay, that's about 8% of Colorado households, and they pay 48% of the state income tax. So, what's fair about 8% of households? Again, most of these people are business owners, entrepreneurs. Uh, they're already covering so much for us, and we get the benefit. They don't see a lot of the benefit sometimes. So,
That's a great point. That's a great point. I'm glad you brought up TABOR, the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. It's one of the things that's kept Colorado as free as we are and really kept our economy as vibrant as it's been able to be under this government that just taxes and spends like crazy. But, really, the second threat to the Colorado economy is it's not necessarily new. We saw this earlier this year with House Joint Resolution 1023. But just recently, this last week, we had State Legislator Representative Sean Camacho and others at a town hall meeting reiterating their goals of repealing the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. I mean, Nash, what would this mean? A lot of people don't know about TABOR. They don't know what the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights provides for Colorado. What would it mean for the wallets of hardworking Coloradans if the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights was repealed?
yeah, I want to go to an even more foundational level of this great country is the idea of consent of the governed, right? It's so, and especially today, this day and age, we have the best technology to be able to hold our government accountable and um, speed of information. you know, it should not be controversial to ask, yeah, okay, if you want to raise taxes, we can have a reasonable discussion. You can ask us as voters, and voters tend to be reasonable, you know. Tabor in itself is reasonable already, I'd argue. Uh, More so than maybe it should be in a way, you know. They get a lot of money with inflation, for example, these last few years, and we see how that's turning out in the budget situation. So, um, it is so important to have consent, uh, taxation with representation. And when you lose that, we already see, you know, like I said, once a carve out exists, it's going to grow, it's going to keep growing, and more and more of our money will go to a government with for meritless reasons, really. You know, we aren't we aren't seeing a lot of the benefits that we supposedly get from getting taxed more. And that's why Tabor's so important.
Oh, definitely. No, couldn't agree with you more. I think the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, Tabor, is so foundational, like you said, to the idea of having our constitutionally limited, government that's supposed to represent the will of the people and supposed to live off of our consent, or supposed to operate off of our consent at the very least. And yeah, we have these greedy legislators who just want to tax and tax and tax and take more and more of our hard-earned money. I mean, especially nowadays, like you mentioned, inflation. People are struggling to pay their bills. People are struggling to afford living in Colorado. I mean, a poll last year showed that half of the Colorado population considered moving out of the state because of affordability issues. And just a recent poll that came out from Magellan Strategies also showed that affordability is still the top issue. So the idea that, we just need to give up more and more of our paycheck. We just need to increase our taxes and make life even more expensive for not just workers, but for the people who are hiring workers is so contrary to creating a good economy and good high paying jobs.
Mhm. Yeah, I was just going to add on the regulation side of it that yeah, we are being strangled from all sides as Coloradans. Uh, Sixth most regulated state in the nation, according to the Chamber of Commerce. And as you mentioned, alluded to earlier, Tabor, we are a victim of our own success in Colorado. You know, the current General Assembly has been able to live beyond their means because we actually have protections. So we haven't had to see the full extent of what they would want to do should their power be unchecked and their spending be unchecked. You know, if they got their full power of the purse to do whatever they want, uh, increase spending.
No, we'd definitely be in a rough situation there, that's for sure, if we didn't have Tabor to protect us and really constrain our legislature from spending so much of our money. But this recent Magellan Strategies poll, which I'll have linked at freestatecolorado.com, shows that twice as many Coloradans support Tabor as oppose it. But the number that really scares me is that about a third of those polled didn't have an opinion at all. So, Nash, I mean, we talked about it briefly already, but what's your 30-second elevator pitch for Tabor? What do Coloradans need to know about Tabor?
Tabor is a reasonable measure that limits government growth to population plus inflation. That's very reasonable. As people move in, sure, you got to spend a little more. As inflation increases, yeah, that hurts everyone. Sure, you get to spend a little more. And then it's all the second component is just voter consent. As I mentioned, you can raise our taxes if we consent.
No, that's huge. And I think as people who don't know about Tabor learn about it, I think that number of support will only increase. And I think that's so much of the work that needs to be done here in
Mhm.
Colorado is to really explain that to people because it's so important. But Nash, what can you tell us a little bit about the Independence Institute as well for people who aren't familiar?
Yeah, we're a free market think tank. I personally focus on a lot of fiscal issues, as we've talked about. So I focus on holding the government accountable to these kinds of things, responsible budgeting and protecting Tabor is one of the key parts of my job, and informing people as you do and educating as many Coloradans as we can because it's so important.
We'll definitely appreciate all the work you do and everybody else at the Independence Institute. People should definitely consider supporting the Independence Institute,
Mhm.
if they don't already. And yeah, check out Nash's articles. You know, you see them a lot often at CompleteColorado.com. Of course, II has their own blog and publish articles there as well. But definitely check out Nash Herman's articles. All good stuff. Important to be informed about what's happening here at Colorado. Anything else that people need to know?
Uh, Follow you. You do such an incredible job, and you make our jobs easier. And we appreciate you getting my message out. Whenever I before I even followed you on Twitter or X, and I saw you publishing my articles, I was so excited and so appreciative because you're getting the message out there. So we thank you
Well,
for that.
definitely, yeah, and keep up the good work. You know, we have a great liberty community, I would call it, here in Colorado, and we can really amplify that work and get the message out. And it's really going to take a community of people getting involved, getting organized, and not just educating the public, but mobilizing people to make some efforts to protect our economy, make us a free state, and make us all a little bit better off.
Yep, exactly. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you, Nash. Keep us up to date. Any other articles or information comes out, please let us know.
Will do.
All right, take care.
You too. Thanks.